So we will allow the department and the two entities to make presentations for 30 minutes each, after which we are going to open to the members to engage like we did yesterday. The minister, as well as the deputy minister, has sent their apologies. There's some urgent matters where the minister had to attend to. The deputy minister is leading the delegation of the Department of Higher Education and Training. They are briefing the select committee of the NCOP, the same briefing they were briefing us yesterday. Maybe we should have, on hindsight, we should have combined these briefings, have a joint meeting with the select committee so that the department doesn't have to brief them and brief us. But anyway, the DM is leading the delegation this afternoon or this evening. Any other apology?
None, Chair.
Okay. All right, let's get straight to the presentation and welcome the DG, Dr. Phil, together with your delegation. Let me hand over to you so that you can take us through your presentation.
Thanks very much, Chairperson. I will, and honorable members, I will load the presentation and we'll drive it from here, and the CFO will do the first set of slides, and then I will do the last set of slides. So I hope we'll be able.
It's quite bad where you are. Are you home?
Yes.
Okay.
Can you see the presentation?
Yeah, the presentation is coming up.
All right, so I'm handing over to the CFO. I'll take the second half. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, DG. Good evening, Chairperson. Good evening, honorable members. I'll be taking you through the first part of the presentation, which mainly focuses on the budget. DG, it looks like the presentation is not on a slideshow. If we can also go on slide, can also go to slide 2. Thank you. The information, yeah, can go to the second slide. Can move to slide 2.
This is slide 2 on my side.
I see. Okay, yeah, thank you. The information on this slide represent the budget that the department had at the beginning of the financial year. This is the same budget that had informed our APP. This budget and the APP were presented to the Portfolio Committee in May 2020. We have included this information so that we can have a reflection on the budget that we had before the cuts and what we are having now after the cuts were effected. We had a total budget of 8.797 billion rand allocated in the financial year 2020-2021. 92.8% of our budget, which is 8.2 billion rand, comprised of transfers and subsidies. This is the money that is transferred to our entities, other science councils, and other institutions such as the universities. And the department retains 7.2% of the budget under the compensation of employees, goods and services and capital assets, cover salaries, administrative and operational expenses. We can move. Okay, this slide was also presented previously. These are all DSI entities. I'm sure members are already familiar with them. This slide also indicates that 78% of our transfers and subsidies budget is allocated to our entities. This budget comprises of the parliamentary grant and the earmark funding. We can also see on how the funds are allocated to different entities. Next slide. These are the budget cuts that were effected during the Special Adjustment Budget 2020-2021. The information indicates areas where the budget has been reduced. 40 million rand was reduced from compensation of employees, which is 2.8% of the cuts. 53.4 million rand from goods and services. It constitutes 3.7% of the cuts. We have split our biggest budget item, which is transfers and subsidies, into two categories. This is because the cuts in these two categories were effected differently. The first category is the public entity parliamentary grant, and the second one is funding for specific programs and projects. The parliamentary grants contributed 295 million rand to the cuts, and the biggest portion of the budget was reduced from the transfers for specific programs and projects. The total budget cuts for the department amounts to 1.435 billion rand, which constitutes 16% of our original budget. The National Treasury initially wanted us to submit a budget cut proposal of 20%. During our engagements with them, we indicated that we have already prioritized 4% of our budget, which is 324 million rand, to support COVID-19 initiatives. Therefore, it will be extremely difficult to propose a 20% cut over and above the reprioritized COVID-19 budget. We then requested that the budget set aside by the department to support COVID-19 initiatives be considered to be part of the required 20% cut. Because even though the budget will remain in the department, it has the same effect as the cuts, since some of the activities which the funds were initially appropriated for will have to be halted, scaled down, or deferred. Our request was considered. So the budget cuts include COVID-19, that includes COVID-19 budget, is 1.75 billion rand, which is 20% of the department's original budget. So the 324 is suspended for COVID-19 initiatives, remains in the department. The 1.4 is going out of the road. Thanks. Next slide, please.
CFO, can I ask you just to speak to the mic, because your voice keep on fading. There are times when you are clear, sometimes you are fading. So speak to if you can, yeah.
I will try, Chair. I'm using the iPad because my laptop has challenges. I will try.
You are clear now. You can just keep it like that.
Okay, I will just come closer. Thank you. Thank you, Chairperson and honorable members. I will now take you through some of the assumptions and rationale that we have used to propose the budget cuts in specific areas. We anticipate realized savings under salaries budget because the recruitment process was delayed due to the lockdown. We will therefore be able to absorb the 40 million rand cut under compensation of employees through these savings. Under goods and services, we have identified items that will not be required and activities that will be halted or severely restricted under the lockdown conditions. We have identified 7 main areas where savings will be realized. The first area, as we can see, is travel, and that also includes its related costs such as subsistence allowance and admin fees for the travel management companies. The assumption that we've made here is that the borders will remain closed for the remainder of the financial year. Hence, the international travel budget has been reduced by 100%. We have also reduced our local travel budget by 70%. We are mindful, Chair, that the situation might change, and we will revise these plans and the budget should the lockdown rules on travel be relaxed before the end of the financial year. The other items that were also identified under goods and services as reflected, projected on the slides, were based on a specific assessment and assumptions that we have made. I'm not going to go through each of them in the interest of time. Next slide, please. This slide shows a breakdown of the parliamentary grant budget cuts per entity. I've mentioned earlier on that the parliamentary grant contributed 295 million to the cuts, and we can see the amounts vary in proportion to the size of the parliamentary grant. Can move. We can move to the next slide. While still on the parliamentary grant, this next slide has details. A 10% cut was effected on entities' parliamentary grant across the board. The same percentage was applied because all entities are using parliamentary grant for similar activities, mainly for salaries, administrative and operational expenses. The department was mindful that a cut of 20% as proposed by Treasury across all entities will have a severe impact on their sustainability. We have also considered that most entities are using some of their parliamentary grant to fund projects, hence a lesser percentage was proposed in order to minimize the impact of the cuts, particularly given that some entities have lost a significant amount of external revenue due to COVID-19 and the economic conditions. It is, however, expected that entities will realize savings in some areas where there will be little or no activity during the lockdown, and some of these savings will be able to help to minimize the impact of the cuts. We can move. Honorable members will remember from one of the previous slides that over 1 billion rand was cut under transfer funding for specific program and projects. This is where the bulk of the budget has been allocated, hence we also have seen a lot of cuts coming from this area. The following factors were considered when we were proposing the cut in this area. We have looked at the projects that will not be feasible to implement due to COVID-19. For an example, those will be infrastructure and science awareness or event-related projects. We have also looked at the projects that were allocated funds during the last quarter of the previous financial year, and that had slim prospect of spending the money in 2020-2021 due to the prevailing conditions. We also considered projects that could be delayed or temporarily suspended until the next financial year without any negative impact in the long term. Unfortunately, even after applying these principles, the budget was not sufficient to cover the required amount of the cuts. And as a result, critical areas such as human resource development and others had to be compromised. The National Treasury was made aware of the impact of these cuts especially in the critical areas. We had hoped, Chair, that those critical areas will not be cut, but unfortunately, when we received the revised allocation letter a few weeks ago, the cuts in these areas were confirmed. And we as a department had to understand and accept that there are competing priorities against the constrained fiscals.
CFO.
On this slide, Chair.
Your audio is
it
really
bad?
bad. Yeah.
Okay, let me hold it on my hand. Maybe is it better now?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Yeah, it's coming okay.
It's better because I'm scared my laptop keep on disconnecting. So my iPad network seems better. I'll just see. I've got my iPad literally closer to my mouth.
Okay.
Thanks, Chair. And now we are on slide 9. Slide 9 reflects the budget cuts per program, excluding parliamentary grant. These amounts include compensation of employees, goods and services, and transfer funding for specific projects. The budget cuts on compensation of employees and goods and services were mainly reduced under Program 1, which is Administration Program. Program 3 contributed a lot as well under goods and services. The program's goods and services budget is 19 million. Therefore, the 14.4 million cut under this item constitutes 76% of the budget, which is quite substantial. The program also has a lot of international activities, including international travel that has to be suspended due to the lockdown. Hence, we're able to identify a lot of savings from this program. Program 4 is evidently the program with the biggest cut under transfers and subsidies and also overall. And the next slide is reflecting on the reasons as to why the program had the biggest cut. And you can see, I'm not going to go through all of them because I'm mindful of the time now. But you can see some of the reasons because the program had the biggest budget allocation. They also have a lot of infrastructure projects that will have to be delayed due to COVID, and most of their projects also had surpluses. And after the assessment and analysis that we've done, we're confident that these surpluses will be able to cover them for the remainder of the financial year. And then we can reallocate budgets in the coming fiscal period. And also one thing to mention is that the 324 million rand that is suspended to COVID mainly comes from Program 2, 3, and 5, because the COVID work that is being done by Program 4 mainly using previous allocated funds. So this also made it extremely difficult, if not impossible, to impose further cuts in other programs over and above what was already proposed. Thank you, Chair. I'll hand over to the DG.
Thanks very much, CFO. So, Chair, I'm going to start by giving the breakdown of the 324 million that the CFO indicated as 4% of the 20% cut. So, as you can see, there was approximately 1.6 million, which we had to earmark for employee health and safety in terms of PPEs, as well as sanitizers and the provision of digital communication because of working from home. The Technology Innovation Program 2, about 102.5 million. And they've been supporting the indigenous knowledge-based remedies. We've heard a lot about the work to support Madagascar and the work that we're doing with our indigenous knowledge holders around a particular medicinal plant that is assumed to be showing some promise to provide modulation for COVID-19, development and manufacturing of test kits and reagents, including rapid tests. And you've heard that the CSIR and two of our platforms are already doing tests approved to support the Department of Health. A study for repurposing of some of the drugs like malaria drugs to see if they have therapeutic effect. And then the Space Agency was asked to assist the Department of Human Settlements as well as the Department of Small Business on the imagery for settlement layers as well as mapping of spaza shops and hotspots. We also managed to secure 35 million to support the International Solidarity Partnership. 15 million was used to leverage about 75 million with the partner countries, Canada, Germany, and the UK, in order to support the activities in the rest of the continent to respond to COVID-19. And then 20 million to co-fund South African participation in a number of European Union programs. This thing keeps. Program 585 million. And here there is work that is supporting the CSIR to develop a data system. And then the work that is being done by the HSRC and some of the science councils to look at the human behavior and perceptions through a number of surveys that they do. The deployment of additive manufacturing 3D technologies for the printing of some of the PPEs in some of the technology stations. I'm sure you've heard recently that the CSIR is coordinating a national ventilator program. And as I've indicated, some of the small medium enterprises and technology stations program. So this is again just another way of showing then how the budget ended up with 1.435, and as we indicated, the 324 making 1.7 was earmarked for the projects that I've just shared with the members. So the impact of the budget cuts on the compensation of employees, we don't anticipate a negative impact because, as the CFO had indicated, general delay in filling of the vacant posts. So we've tried to do a scenario planning as to when these posts will be filled. In goods and services, as she indicated, in areas where we are unlikely to be traveling or having activities that require advertising, we've made cuts on those, so we think that will not be affected. But of course, we've made sufficient funds for IT platforms to support the employees working remotely. And as we expect, the department and its entities have to revise the number of targets. So I just want to quickly go through those targets that we have revised in Program 1. Science communication, branding, and marketing and activities that will be reduced. And then, as we indicated, on the 90% of approved funded posts filled by March, we will have 75% because of the delays that we have indicated. In Program 2, instead of having 17 technology demonstrators, prototypes, products, and services developed in these areas, we're going to have 10. And then instead of 7 commercial products in these areas, we're going to only have 4. There have been budget cuts in this program, but there's no intention to revise any of the planned targets. The program aims to do more with less. And then on Program 4, 3 main areas have been affected. The students, as we anticipate, instead of 3,100 PhD students, we will have to award 2,000 PhD students. Pipeline students, postgraduate students, instead of 9,300, we will support 6,000. And then the researchers as the second category, 950 less for the NRF managed programs. And then in terms of the accredited research articles, from 7,000 to 6,500. And the CFO indicated that it is anticipated that some of the initiatives that are promoting public awareness and engagement will be reduced, so that indicator has been removed because the chances of hosting the National Science Week and Science Festivals are almost zero, and then a reduced availability of broadband capacity under the National Integrated Cyber Infrastructure System, NICIS. We also, in Program 5, going to have a reduced number of students, honors, masters, and doctoral students that are participating in these specific areas that are shown, from 392 to 313. And then on industry relevant knowledge and innovation products from 70 to 42 in the IP portfolio. So in conclusion, Chairperson, is that we've tried to make trade-offs, and even though it's difficult, however, with all entities challenged by these cuts, it is sometimes not so easy to facilitate trade-offs. But we think with the framework that we have shared with you, we've done the best in consultation with National Treasury. And we have been told by National Treasury that in order to get the monies they needed, some departments had to be cut at 27 or even 30%. So we accept the cuts that have been made, and then we will continuously assess the budget performance mid-year. And if there are further adjustments, we will engage with the entities, and of course we will share with you, especially those entities that have to get external income. We are aware that there will be under huge pressure for them to get the income both from government as well as those that have to get income from the private sector. And then we also have started to work with the entities to look at monies that were transferred or unspent by the end of this financial year that has ended. And we would like to work with the entities to look at the progress made on these projects. We do know that some of the monies are already monies that are committed, so we would like to work with them. And then, of course, we will continue to redirect funds to other entities that are heavy